So I think I probably said I was going to talk about MGA Electrics tonight. I just got done doing a 2-hour presentation downstairs this morning on MGA Electrics. So let me just cover MGAs just sort of overall, just as an introduction, not get too heavy duty into the detail of the electrics is what I mean. So I think, help me out, EX179, one of the cars that the factory put together to race at Le Mans looks just like an MGA. That's where the body came from. I'm gonna hit that mute all because you can hear the noise in the background. So okay, there we go. And that was 1952 or 53. And so the factory was campaigning to get the funds to make the dies to come out with this brand new MGA to replace the TD. But Leonard Lord, who was running BMC, which had just formed up in 1952, a combination of the Nuffield organization, which was Morris, Wolseley, and MG, had just combined with Austin to form the British Motor Corporation. And they'd already started making a Healey in 54. And I think it was Leonard Lord said, what's the point? I'm not going to make, two cars that look exactly the same. I always thought that Healeys and MGAs looked remarkably similar, but I never thought of them looking the same until 2017. And I went to the MGB meet in San Diego, Coronado, California. And across the parking lot, I saw a Healey. It's a big Healey. And later in the afternoon, when I actually walked over there and walked by it, it was an MGA with a Healey with a lines, that round line in front, tapering off towards the rear wheel arch, as a Healey would be painted if it were two-tone. And by golly, from a distance, they did look the same. So anyway, the factory said, we're not going to make two cars that look the same. But once they got done with the TF, which was, I think they designed that. I think the word was that they botched that all up. That's a terrible verb to use. They had designed and put together the TF in a very, very short amount of time. For a long time, like when I got involved with MG in 1968, TFs, the T-typers didn't really like the TFs. They didn't have the square radiator. They had the running boards, they had the whole thing, but it was too modern. It was too swept to be a real square rigger. So they were looked down on. Well, now the TFs are as popular as a TC. They're most everybody respects them now as good-looking cars, but at the time they were kind of frowned on. So when the TF ended production, out came the MGA as early as 1955. So this thing carried the BMC B series engine, the 1500 engine, a completely different gearbox than the old T-type. The gearbox and engine were taken off the line from regular BMC cars. The early gearboxes are all set up for side shifters, column shifters, like you'd find in a Nash Metropolitan, which uses the same gearbox as an MGA, only that it's 3-speed and it's a side shifter. So, but the main case is the same, stuff like that. So they made up the MGA, and it was wonderfully popular. They started exporting a great number of them. The number that you see written in the books is that one stayed home and 19 came to the United States. So that it was a export or die campaign that the British government was running. England was absolutely broke after the Second World War. They were still on rationing, meat rationing, at least until 1953. Things had really, really changed since before the war. Things were really desperate. The empire was gone, the country was broke. You could not take more than 50 pounds out of the country on vacation. Now, 50 pounds was a lot of money in 1953. But still, they had severe restrictions on money flowing out of the country, and they were very keen on getting money in. And BMC filled that requirement by exporting so many of their vehicles to the United States and bringing needed cash and profit back to BMC. So the MGA ran great through 56 through 57, and then the racing guys started making a lot of noise at the factory, and said, "Come on, we want a car that we can get into and take right out to the track and race and have a really good chance at doing well out on the track." So the factory developed the twin cam engine based on a little larger bore than the MGA. MGA is 2 7/8. That's the bore on that. The stroke is 3.5 inches from 1954 through 1980, but the piston diameter keeps increasing. But the 1500 is 2 7/8, so they popped it up to not 3 inches. That's a 1622, but just shy of a 3-inch bore, and put a Hemi engine. That put a Hemi head on this block, and that was the MGA twin cam. They brought that out in 1959. So that was running. Now, all through production, you had both roadsters and coupes. There weren't very many coupes made altogether. Out of a run of 110,000 MGAs, 10,000 were coupes. But the MGA 1500, which they made something like 60,000, that was the greatest number. It was just a wild success here in the United States. So during the twin cam production, the normal MGAs, for advertising sake, for something or other, jumped the displacement of the engine from 1500 to 1600. 100 cc's isn't very much if you buy it in a Coca-Cola bottle. If it's in a syringe and they're going to inject it in your arm, of course, it looks like a whole lot more. But 100 cc's isn't very much. But they did add disc brakes to the front of the car. That was a very modern improvement. The twin cam had four-wheel disc brakes, Dunlop brakes. That company was purchased by Girling later on. So the MGA twin cam had both the 1500 body style and the 1600 body style. The difference being the taillight configuration. The 1500 had just single lamps in the back, and the 1600 had those same lamps plus a beehive for the turn signal. And then, of course, the disc brakes on the 1600. Well, sales, they ran that model 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, and 61. Right towards the end of production, they're starting to get beat up by Triumph, by Sunbeam. Remember the Sunbeam Alpines? So they're starting to struggle, and so they changed the MGA around again. They put in a little larger engine, not much, 1622, which has got a 3-inch piston, and that made it common with a lot of other vehicles that were being produced by BMC at the same time. And they changed the taillights, used mini taillights, and took them from straight up and turned them on sides and laid them down. To each his own, but that's the more attractive taillight configuration for me. I like that configuration. And they also recessed the grille. Some people say it was to get better airflow. Well, they sure waited a long time to do that. Other people said it was to protect the grill, but if somebody backs into you, it still gets crunched and isn't going to protect it much. I think it was just an enhancement, just a little bit of an advertising change, dress the car up a little bit to see if they could get some more sales out of it. And so at the very end, they had the 1600 Mark II, which had that 1622 engine, still the same disc brakes in front. The twin cam, the MGA twin cam, which was initially well received, had all kinds of production problems and all kinds of problems in the field. I've got a set of confidential service memorandums that begin, well, about 1930. But by the time you get to the MGA twin cam, every third confidential service memorandum, which was sent out to dealers in the field, every third one had to do with the twin cam, vibrations, just all putting holes in the pistons, just all kinds of trouble. And after 2,111 units, both Roadster and Coupe, somebody walked down on the floor and said, "That's it, no more twin cams." Now they'd ordered 2,500 chassis and 2,500 engines. Well, they hated the engines, so they scrapped the engines to take advantage of the tax savings. The tax man is a big important guy in England, no matter whether you're an individual or a company. So they scrapped the engines, but they kept the chassis, the remainder of the chassis. So they'd ordered 2,500, which left 389. And right at the end of production, they pulled these chassis back out, put a regular 1622 engine in them, and called them the all-round disc brake model, which are today known as the MGA Deluxe. And I think there were 396 of those altogether produced, which makes it the rarest of all the MGAs. But the twin cam is the one which always gets the highest price if you're looking on Bring a Trailer or sites like that for MGAs. So throughout production, 110,000 were made, 10,000 coupes, and then what I say, I think it's 60,000 1500s, and then maybe 30,000 1600s and 10,000. That doesn't add up quite right, but I'm getting close. Don't know the numbers off the top of my head. So they came in a rainbow of colors. There was black, there was white, there was red, weird blues, and no greens, except Tyrolite green, which hardly classifies as a green. So there are a lot of swimming pool colors. That's what I call them. They look like Formica, weird colors. They returned to that kind of weird color combination with the MGB in the early 70s. Had aqua and tundra, all kinds of earth colors. But anyway, there's a line of MGAs outside, probably 100 of them, parked double wide, and a line 50 cars wide down in the parking lot here in Memphis. They're good cars, they're fun cars. They're 4 inches narrower than an MGB. They use the same front suspension as a 1950 TD, as a 1980 MGB. They have a live axle, rear axle, that doesn't differ much from a T-type or an MGB. Does have a banjo rear axle, so changing the rear axle ratio is easier on the racetrack. They came with disc wheels or wire wheels. The twin cams came with a disc wheel which used a spinner, a Dunlop wheel. Anyway, it's a nice run of cars. The organization that handles them is NAMGAR, the North American MGA Register, the only register that is pronounceable. The one after that that's pronounceable is the American MGC Register Association, which is AMCRA. And then there's the MGB organization, the North American MGB Register, NAMGBR, which is NAMGBR. It's a hard to pronounce that one. But the MGA Club has an annual meeting every year, a GT, a get together. This is their 48th in a series. I don't think interrupted by COVID. Maybe 1 year, maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a nice organization. If you are an MGA owner, go on to namgar.org, namgar.org.com, something, and sign up. So I'm going to get my mute all. Get rid of that. Thank you. So anyway, that's my my introduction tonight. So now we are going to go into our chat section. Well, first of all, let me ask anyone if you have questions about an MGA.
Hey, John, you just mentioned about live axle and I've also heard semi-floating. Can you explain that? I never understood that.
A live axle is a solid axle. So it's different from like a GT6 or a TR250 or TR6, where you've got a fixed differential in the middle and then CV joints and U joints that put the, I'm Robert, I'm sorry, I got to mute one guy here. I don't mean to mute you, but you can unmute yourself again. So that's a live axle. The other is IRS, independent rear suspension. There's other words that I read and I don't know what they mean. The MGB was supposed to come out with a Dion rear end. I don't know what that was or is. And I don't know what semi-floating means, except that we've got half elliptic springs. They're not full elliptics and they're not quarter elliptic like a Bug-Eye Sprite. So unless somebody else can help me out, I'm stalled on defining what a semi-floating rear end is. But I don't hear anybody stepping up to the plate here, so. I'll find
John,
out. Yes.
Hey, John, Mike Baldwin. I don't claim to be an expert on that, but I thought I heard somewhere that semi-floating has to do with how the axles are retained in the differential. Not, in other words, some of them have C clips and some of them have retainers at the end, and I think that may have something to do with the lingo.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do some research so I don't fall flat next time when Robert says, "Did you find an answer for me?" So yeah, there's 3/4.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Hey, John.
Jim. Yes.
Yeah. This is Jim Conklin, Knoxville, Tennessee. There are 3 engineering loads that occur at the rear axle. One is the torque of the shaft, the other is the weight of the vehicle, and the other is the moment induced by the fact that the wheel is offset from the bearing surface. A semi-floating axle transmits all 3 of those loads. A 3/4 axle, like you find on 3/4 pickups, has the supports the load of the vehicle, the weight of the vehicle on the rear wheel, as well as, I'm sorry, I think I got that wrong. The torque, the moment is transmitted there. And a full floating axle, like you find on 1-ton or fully floating axle trucks, pickup trucks, only supports the torque of the axle, the transmitting torque to the ground. Now, my MGA, which is a 62 Mark II, has a 3/4 floating axle. I hope I was clear with that, maybe not, but let me know.
I want to do some more reading on that too. I know that the way that the half shafts fit in with the bearings on the outside of the housing and the axle itself. The axle itself isn't running inside a ball bearing; it's just flanged against it. So, yeah, I'll do some reading on this and see if I can explain it too, because I'm still not sure from your explanation. Not that it was inadequate, but I just don't get it yet. So, and because I don't really, I'm not a car, it's my joke all the time. I'm not a car guy, so I don't know what a 3/4 truck is or a 1-ton truck. I just don't even know. So anyway, Robert will answer more of that later. So what about some MGA questions? We've got MGA, well, not that wasn't, I mean, but anyway, the MGA questions. Got MGA owners out there who are embarrassed that they should be here in Memphis this weekend and you're not here?
So John, are you going to explain the difference between the turn signals on the 1500 and the 1600?
I did.
That's the major difference between how they operate.
I did today in my electrical explanation with the turn signal box. So between the 1500 and the 1600 MGAs, they finally made it easy. So beginning with a TD for the American market and the TF and then the MGAs, there's one bulb, an 1157 bulb with a bright and a dim filament on each side. But those have to do three things. They have to come on when you turn the taillights on. They have to illuminate. The bright one has to illuminate when you are braking your brake lights, and the bright one has to illuminate when you're turning, when the turn signals operate. So you've got three functions with two filaments. So in the 1500 and the T-types before that, there's a turn signal box that carries a pair of double pole, double throw relays. And those then separate one side from the other and allow one side to have the brake light on, whereas the other side can have the turn signal on. And that is a massive difference between the 1500 and the 1600. Fred, thank you very much. Your name did come up today in my MGA discussion because I had a MGA starter switch. Well, it wasn't an MGA starter switch, was it? Because the build date on it was 4 of 53, I think. So I saw the build date on that, and I also had a build date on the dynamo. So I did bring your name up today during the electrical discussion.
Hey, John, I got a question about clutch in my 59A.
Sure.
And this has been a reoccurring problem. So I acquired the car for my wife bought it for my 50th. She's now known as the mistress because I spend more money and time on it than on her. So in rebuilding master cylinder, new lines, new hoses, new cylinder for the clutch slave, I blew out the clutch. That is, the pressure plate was hitting the flywheel when you press the clutch pedal in all the way. And I put in more slack at the master cylinder and tried all sorts of different things, put in a new clutch, same thing.
So
Managed to
tell
get
me, just a minute, tell me again what happened when you hit the clutch pedal.
if you push the clutch pedal all the way to the floor,
Mm-hmm.
then it seems to be overthrowing the pressure plate, and then the pressure plate's contacting something it shouldn't.
The clutch disc, you get a sound,
Yeah,
you can feel it in the pedal.
exactly.
Okay. Do you have real fluid or silicone fluid?
Silicone.
Okay, that's the problem. So there is, I haven't got a picture of it in front of me that so all I can do is talk to you about it, but you've got a bore, right? A bore, and in that bore is a piston. And at the rear of the piston is a rubber seal, and just adjacent to that rubber seal, the primary seal, is a tiny little hole. I mean, that thing is smaller than a 64th of an inch. It is a tiny, tiny pinhole that goes between the master cylinder bore and the master cylinder reservoir. So when your pedal is all the way up and you got free play in the pedal, that piston sits, that primary cup sits barely forward of that hole, so that if you have too much pressure in your system, it can vent up into the reservoir, or conversely, if the system requires some more fluid can move freely from the reservoir into the master cylinder bore. When you use silicone fluid, it swells those seals just a tiny little bit, but just enough to cover up that hole, that bleed hole. So the solution is to allow the master cylinder piston to come farther forward in the bore. This is going on with the brakes too. Come farther forward in the bore than it normally is, but only by just a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of an inch. So there's lots of ways to do that. You could take the piston out, and you could chuck up in a lathe, and you could take a 32nd of an inch off the front of the piston. That's a whole lot of hassle, messy, so forth. You could simply unscrew the screws that hold the front plate on the master cylinder, back those screws off by, say 1 full turn. Now the piston's going to come forward and hit that plate. Before it was hitting it here, now the plate's here, so the piston can go a little farther forward. But if you leave the screws loose, they're going to get too loose. Better to put some kind of shim in there. So make a gasket out of material that's about as thick as a cigarette carton. I haven't bought a carton of cigarettes in a long time. I can only remember about how thick it is. You know what I mean? I'm just
Yeah. Manila folder, yeah.
yeah, really that. Well, maybe 2. So you have to make the circles large enough in there so that the piston can go through them. If you have an existing gasket, an old gasket off your old master cylinder or your old master cylinder, then you can trace around and make those holes the right size. Now, it's not necessary to take the push rods out and take the plate off and put it back on. Just snip the bottom of that new gasket, that shim. Just snip it and put it around the push rods and fit it into place when you've got the cover removed. Now,
That's also assuming that the push rods are not too long.
well, he said he had free play.
Okay, but
Yeah.
not too much free play.
Okay, so you want half an inch of pedal free play, tunk. But John, you told me that you had that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So let those pistons come a little farther forward. Yeah, file folder thickness, that or 2, and that'll do it. That will solve your problem, because right now you're holding pressure inside the system, unless you built the master cylinder incorrectly. There is a one-way valve, and that one-way valve goes on the brake side to hold pressure in the brakes, and there is no valve or spring like that in the there is no valve or seat on the clutch side. So
I got that correct.
okay, all right. I think that'll probably do it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. MGA questions?
Can you tell us the difference I saw on the webpage, the difference between the squirrel cage on the heater fan between an A and a B?
I looked at both those in my picture. I thought, now which one's which? You know, and you don't have to be an HVAC engineer to tell, but one of them's blowing the air one way and the other is blowing the air the other way. So if you turn it on, the top of the blower, the top of the top of the squirrel cage should be pointing in the direction that the air is blowing. Does that make sense?
Yes, somewhat. So I've got 2 A's, one heater blows and one the heater doesn't. So I'll take them both apart and find out if I got one's a B.
Well, all you have to do is take the thing off and power them up, and if they're spinning opposite, that's why. Then the question is, which is the right one? So mark them before you take it out. Don't get them confused. Yep. So yeah, that's not an uncommon problem, because they look exactly the same. The more modern ones, the MGB ones, have a little sticker on them with an arrow that says rotation. No, but if you look at it, the top of the fan determines the direction that the air is going. So,
John,
yes,
if you're fitting LED taillights on an MGA 1500, are there any modifications that need to be done other than the flashing unit?
no, that's it. You want to use an EL13 flasher unit. If you've been so bold as to switch your vehicle over to negative earth, If not, you've got to buy a special EL13 that's set up for positive earth. That's all.
Okay, thanks, John.
Looking for MGA questions.
Hey, John?
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, a couple of questions. I actually typed them up, but I'll just ask you. So I have what I've discovered is a competition type oil cooler for my MGA. It's a 56. It's the lower 4-row cooler.
Okay.
And I've got all kinds of crazy hoses that some of them are original fittings. And then I had some hydraulic hoses made for a few years ago. But there's all kinds of brazed adapters and things, and I'm having leaking points, so I want to get rid of all that. I'm thinking about just going to stainless steel lines. I'll need some adapters, but I'm wondering while I'm doing it, it would actually be cheaper just to get the hoses for an aftermarket sort of typical 13-row one that you can get now.
Yes.
And-
Is yours mounted in front of the radiator or underneath the car?
Mine is mounted in front of the radiator, but just behind the grill with it looks like a factory cutout and a cowling that takes the air off of the oil heater down underneath the car. It's actually kind of a neat
Oh,
design.
that's probably homemade, but yeah, that's cool. No, if you just get a pair of cooler hoses for an MGB, you'll be all set.
And do you think I should stay with the original cooler? I mean, it's almost 70 years old. Do you think it's probably seen its best days, or should I?
Well, it certainly is passing oil.
Yeah.
Or you'd have oil pressure problems.
Yeah.
And you can clean them in an ultrasonic cleaner. You find someone with a big enough ultrasonic cleaner who wants to get it all filthy with oil.
Right.
You know, if
Right.
and you can also just although, you know, I mean, you can take clamp it into a vise with a couple pieces of wood and use your power washer and blow through it. But how much more pressure are you going to get out of a power washer than the flow that you're going to get from the oil? So
Yeah.
when they do silt up, they silt up from the bottom.
Okay.
But yours apparently, you know, I just offhand, if you took yours out of there and poured some lacquer thinner in it or mineral spirits or gasoline's a wonderful solvent, and just
Yeah.
put your thumbs on the end and shook
Shake it
it
around.
until you were sick of shaking it and poured it out, you'd probably get it as much out. But use anti-seize
Yep.
between the new fittings. I just talked to Barney Gaylord. Barney's got the MGA Guru site.
Yep.
He's here this weekend. And he said that he had two new easy for me to say, two new oil cooler hoses blow apart in the past couple of years.
Ooh.
So I don't know who's got better hoses than another. But that just, you know, by the time you realize that there's a problem, you've run the engine dry and you got to change the rod bearings at least. I mean, you empty out the whole sump in a matter of 15 seconds.
Yeah.
There's a lot of oil going through there.
Yeah.
But you can use that small cooler. That's fine. There's
Okay.
no problem doing that. Where the hoses go through the radiator diaphragm, if you drill holes large enough, you can get the MGB grommets that fit in there to protect them, so that you haven't got raw metal or the line isn't bouncing up and down and getting a cut in it or something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
And
Can I
the-
ask? Sorry, go ahead.
And to get the old oil cooler lines off the aluminum, it's necessary to, well, not necessary, but it's helpful sometimes to take a 5-gallon pail of water, as cold as you can get it, put ice in it if you can, and a bundle of rags. If you're doing it in place, take your propane torch and heat up the nut that goes onto the oil cooler until you're sick of heating it. You can't melt the aluminum. You can start to hear the oil inside boil, and then take all those rags, those ice cold rags, and pick them up and put them around that joint, because you're separating dissimilar metals. And you separate dissimilar metals by quenching. You separate similar metals by heating. you separate dissimilar metals by quenching, but of course you can't quench until it's hot. So you get it
Right.
really hot with a propane torch and then quench it, and those nuts will come off almost by hand.
Okay,
When you
Okay.
put them back on, you use anti-seize.
right, okay, yeah, make
All
note
right,
of that.
okay.
Great, thank you.
You
I have, I have
yeah.
another question, but I'll wait and let somebody else ask one. I'll jump on later.
Okay,
Thanks.
Okay, hey, John, I
Bob,
got a, Bob, yeah. I have a 1500 MGA. I have trouble with the transmission. When I shift like from first to reverse, I gotta make sure I'm not rolling a little bit forward or backwards because my transmission will lock up. When in first gear, I cannot, it won't roll at all forward. Let the clutch out, it locks. Put it in second, we'll do that. I could put it in fourth, it'll go, but hard, and I usually have to get out of the car, just leave it in neutral and rock it back and forth to free these frozen gears. I don't know what's happening that causes them, if I go in first, let the clutch out, it just locks. And the same thing going down to second.
so,
And
so you really can't drive the car for fear of getting it locked up in gear?
well, I'm leery about going out, yeah.
Yeah, me,
Because-
I would be too. So what's the history of the gearbox?
It's the original box. I had the car, it'll be 40 years this October. And nothing has ever been touched in the transmission. Same with the engine. I pulled the engine to put a new clutch in it at one time. But this happened maybe, 2 years ago. It happened once or twice in the summer. And then last year, now in the past week, it happened to me twice.
Well, you sure don't want to have it in two gears when you're moving,
Yeah.
because
And,
it locks up the rear axle.
yeah, it locks up something in the transmission. You get out and you push it, it won't even roll. Like in neutral, I gotta keep rocking back and forth right until this pops out, something pops out, then I could drive it.
I'm really, really hard pressed. I mean, I guess I just had a guy call me last week with an overdrive MGB gearbox, 3-synchro gearbox. He said he couldn't get it into reverse. And I said, what, it's grinding? Yeah, it's grinding. So we went through the whole clutch thing. Well, no, he didn't mean that. He meant he couldn't get the gear lever rearwards, so it would engage reverse.
Uh-huh.
And then talking more about it, it turned out it also sometimes wouldn't go into second or fourth. So any rear motion on the gear lever, it wouldn't go in. And I went through some possibilities. I sort of gave up. I turned him over to Glenn at Glenn's MG service in Tampa, Florida, St. Petersburg. And Glenn talked to him and he couldn't come up with a reason. And so the guy ended up pulling out the engine and gearbox, took the remote control off, and the shaft and the remote control was bent. How would it bend? It's a 1/2-inch shaft. How would it bend? And so it was a mechanical obstruction from getting it in. I just never would have come up with that. And I'm really having a real hard time with yours. There is a bizarre possibility. There are 3 screws that go into the shifter forks. They go through the brass shifter forks into the steel shifter rods, shifter rails, whatever you want to call them. And once in a blue moon, one of those will shear. Why? Because it's your lucky day, I guess. And therefore, when you go to put it into, when you pull it out of a gear, it doesn't come out of that gear, but you can go ahead and put it into another gear because the gearbox doesn't know it's already in gear. And that way you end up being in 2 gears at once. But then you ought to be able to pull it out of the 1 gear and still have it stuck in the gear it was stuck in to begin with. I don't think it's the synchronous. Yes.
I'll weigh in this from left field. A little over a year ago, I had a similar issue. I couldn't get it in between first and second. This is in regards to an 80B until after I ran about maybe 5 miles, and then everything worked fine. But it happened 2 or 3 times. you and I talked about it. Your memory may not be that
No,
good.
I remember the question. I don't remember the answer.
Yeah, it ended up, our theory, we had to pull the gearbox out and there was a hairline, a very faint hairline crack on the interlock arm. And we replaced that. The interlock arm is no longer made for that model. And I got one out of Denver. I forget the gentleman's name.
Sports Car Craftsman, Arvada, Colorado. Yeah.
That's correct. You told me to call him. We replaced that and everything's been fine. But it's still somewhat of a mystery, as all the gurus have told me interlock arms do not fail.
Well, but there was a crack in yours and you put another one in and now it works. Yeah, or something. Yeah. Boy, I'm stalled. I'm stalled on this two gears
Hey,
at once. Yeah,
John,
Fred.
one time I found on an MGA gearbox, this would be similar on a 3-synchro MGB box, but the shift lever extension rod comes forward, has a single little lever on it, and it selects which gear you're going to select. You know, those three.
Yeah, it's got the little finger that comes into the
fingers.
gate.
Well, that selector was so worn, they could slip between two of them, so that the little interlock part, it could bypass that and slip between two, so you could lock up between two gears.
Okay.
So
All
that's
right.
the possibility, is look at those, that the selector lever and the fingers that it goes into. I can't remember which one was worn. I think it's the 3 fingers of the selector forks.
So of course, this requires that the gearbox comes out
Yeah.
of the car.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my mantra has been for 2 years, the simplest, easiest, cheapest thing. And I can't get there here. It just,
Well, in this case, you could pull off the shift extension and examine everything without taking the gearbox out.
we could. The remote control assembly, yes. Yep, okay, so carpets, the seats come out, carpets come out, that elliptical flying saucer shaped thing that sits over the gearbox comes off, and then there's 4 bolts that are 5/16 fine thread on the early cars, the 1500s, and coarse thread on the 1600s, another difference between the vehicles. Take that off, and I look in there. I don't know, what are you gonna see? You talk to me some more on the phone. You can take pictures with your phone and send them to me. Fred, that's an excellent idea. Thank you very much. That's yep, absolutely. Yep, that's the cheapest, that's the first step to take, is to take the remote control housing off. And just look at it. Yep,
It's gonna have to come out anyway if you're gonna remove the transmission, so.
that's right. Yep. Okay,
Hey, I have a spare engine and transmission, everything from a 1500. Maybe I just pull it out and check out this other transmission. It's been sitting there for 30 years. Out of a parts car, I took it. It may be better just to swap transmissions.
it's pig and
Well,
poke. Second
Yeah,
gear
you
synchro.
wanna examine all your synchros before you swap.
Second gear synchro is bad, for sure.
You know, how do you
So-
check that out? It's,
In place, it's almost impossible. Put it in first gear and look at the, there's I'm gonna attempt to do a drawing and hold it up in front of the, just a second here. So the synchro ring has 3 dogs on the side, and the dog looks like a house here.
yeah,
And when it wears, it ends up looking like this. That's how you can tell that it's worn. How much?
worn down, yeah.
How much is it worn up there? So you might be able to see that by taking the side cover off, putting and shifting it into first gear, and looking there and seeing if you can see the dog in there. So,
Well, try do that first and see.
well, you can, take take the remote control housing off and take some pictures inside there and work the remote control housing up on the bench that isn't going to work. That isn't going to work because there's a shifter rod. You can't see the fingers there. You can't see them. There's a rod that goes up there. But as Fred said, you have to take it before you take the gearbox out. You have to take it off anyway. So you might as well take it off and just fiddle fart around with it, and then just see.
Yeah.
Take some pictures, send them to me, and then call Glenn. Glenn and I were both stumped with this last one. So
Also make sure that the bushing is in the end of the shifter lever. You might have enough slop in there that it's causing problems.
yeah, not to lock into
Not-
two
No,
gears
probably
though.
not.
All right.
Okay, it gives me a start to play with it.
It's a start. Yeah, I wouldn't drive it. I had a guy with a late model MGB, like a 77 through 80 MGB. He was driving on US 131 north of Grand Rapids, doing, help me out, probably doing 80. And there's a particular fault with a Salisbury differential that there's a pin. There's a pin that locates an axle, and that axle holds the pinion gears. The two of the four gears together make up what we commonly call the spider gears. And that thing started walking out, sticking out farther and farther and farther out of the carrier. And when he hit mile marker 27 or something or other, it selected at that point to come out far enough to hit the pinion, and the carrier locked. That locked up the rear axles. And he did 2 360s on the expressway at 80 miles an hour. No, he was just fine, but he said he was pretty scared. So,
Yeah, it would be.
yeah, so I wouldn't drive it until you get it sorted out.
Okay, thanks for all the info.
Yeah, Bob, good luck, and then please stay in touch. I just love to know.
Yeah, okay, I'll keep in touch. And thanks, I remember when you were up here in Cleveland, you looked at my car, which I called the J5, the little cycle
Oh,
fender.
yeah,
You helped me.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of monkeyed with the carbs a little bit and tuned it up. And
That's
I just want to know that that was one of my cars too, besides the A.
Okay, Bob, send me a note and I'll put a picture of that. I had a picture of that car up, didn't I? On one of my emails that went out. I'm sure I put that up because it's so
I
unusual.
don't recall seeing it, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Well,
Okay.
remind me and I'll put it up. That's a
Yeah.
real labor of love. So,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, it took me a long time, but it got a lot of people fooled what it is.
There's a J3 here, belongs to Bill Ritchie. There's a crank blown supercharger on it. Oh, cable brakes. Oh my gosh. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
car which looks like it's made out of dollar bills. I mean, it's really,
Well, this,
really spectacular.
yeah, but this is all a 65B
Right.
engine tranny running
Yeah.
gear,
Yeah.
built on a TD frame
Yeah, I
and
remember.
the body.
And with lime green, I
Yep,
distinct with a louvered bonnet, I think. I
Yeah, it was
distinct,
louvered all over, right?
yeah, distinctly
Cycle
remember.
fender.
Yep.
Okay, glad you
Okay.
remember that.
Okay,
Okay,
So
we'll keep in touch with you on all this.
thanks. Yeah, please.
Okay,
So-
thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Do we have any more MGA questions?
John, you were
Yes.
talking to the guy about putting those cold rags on.
Yeah,
There's a product called CRC Freeze Off that you can spray on it and it crack it.
okay.
I've only used it a couple times, but it's kind of messy, but it
Well,
does work.
it's like the doctor used to have those CO2 cartridges that
Yes,
would form up dry ice. So,
yes,
Yeah, yep,
okay.
Hey, John.
yes.
Yeah,
Tom.
what would happen to the engine if you locked up your wheels at 80 miles an hour? Your whole drivetrain is locked up, including the drive shaft of your engine, and the pistons stop immediately? Is that what would happen?
Something would let loose.
U-joint, maybe.
I was gonna say the clutch,
Oh, clutch.
probably. Yeah,
Yeah,
some,
under that kind of torque, it's likely the clutch disc is going to slip.
yep, yeah,
Okay.
something with, yeah, that's a lot of momentum to suddenly stop. Yep, yep. They're real dangerous. Any more questions?
John,
MGA, yes, Howard,
how are you? Right.
great.
You were saying that the Twin Cam A had disc brakes on the rear, Dunlop disc brakes, and so did the Mark II Deluxe. Is the axle different?
No,
If you had, say, a 1500 Mark I, would you have to change the rear axle to fit the disc brakes on?
you could, if you could find the rear axle, but remember that it takes a special wheel. So
Yeah.
that, the wheel width, the rear axle width is designed to take the Dunlop wheels. So I don't know whether, because the width changes between disc and wire wheel by 3/4 of an inch on the side. The disc wheel differential is wider overall by 1.5 inches. I don't know how that changes with the twin cam differential, because it's the twin cam diff. Used on both are you calling from Yorkshire?
Yeah.
Howie?
Yeah.
Hey, how you doing, mate?
All right.
Okay. So, yeah, it's the same, Howard and I worked at University Motors over 50 years, well, yeah, over 50 years ago.
Oh, don't rub it in.
Yeah, all right. So, he did electrics, and I was the immigrant. I was the Yank. So, yeah.
Yeah, good days. Good days
Yeah,
they were.
hey, fun. And anyway, you could do that, but then the wheels would look different than the front. So you'd have to put the MGA twin cam wheels on the front. And for all that, you might as well just go out and buy the Deluxe. So some people are keen on putting disc wheels on the back of an MGB, but it's really overkill. I mean, it just, there's no difference between the stopping distance of a drum brake and a disc brake. It's just that the disc brake cools more easily, more quickly. And if you do repeated stops, Carl Heidemann, my associate in Holland, Michigan, did repeated 0 to 60 to stop, 0 to 60 to stop in an MGB. And after 20 of those, the brake pedal started to feel a little spongy. Okay, on disc brakes, it would occur sooner with drum brakes, but no one drives like that. I mean, not even on the M25, the people drive 0 to 60 to stop so repeatedly. So it's the disc brakes are nice on the front of a B. Some people choose to put them on the front of a or a T-type and TD or TF, but disc brakes on the back end just isn't necessary.
Right. Okay. Just a thought, that was all.
Hey, pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
And you too. You take care, mate.
Thanks. Here's Bob Gexy has his J5.
Yeah, pulled up a picture of it.
Yep, on the yep, yeah, very cool picture. Well, that's what I meant. Yep. All right. So do we have
Here's
any more?
another of the
Oh yeah.
dash and stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Pretty unusual. All homemade. It's a real labor of love. What'd you say it took you 30 years between?
Yes,
start and
well, I
stop on?
started like 40 years ago.
Okay.
And just kept worked on it, then didn't work on it, and then worked on it. Took a while.
Yeah,
So
that's
a couple years ago, Barry Jacobs offered me his warehouse heated in the wintertime to finish it. So I got it done finally.
yep, very nice.
Yeah. Okay, I thought I'd like to spread that around.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, John, you mentioned about that guy's 80 MGB where the pin came out of the rear or something like that.
Yes.
I have an 80 MGB and I'm and I do take it out on the highway now and again. Not at 80 and 90 miles an hour. I don't have, my balls ain't that big, but I'm not afraid to get it up to 60, 70, you know, and
If you,
not for any length of time, but I've never had any issues. And now I'm beginning to wonder, you know, what exactly happens there?
I think I've only seen that particular failure less than a handful of times in 50 years. So your car won't do that. But if you want to make certain that it doesn't happen, you have to get the car up in the air, drain out the differential, take off the rear cover, roll the carrier around just by turning the drive shaft or one of the rear wheels. Roll it around until you can see the pin. It's a BTB 656, one of the very few part numbers that I can call up. It's a roll pin, a 3/16 roll pin. And you can see where that's driven through the carrier and then through the axle that holds the pinion gears that have the hemispherical copper washers underneath them within the carrier itself. It's all very easy to see once you get it apart. So then you take I want to say a 5/64 split pin that's about 4 inches long, push it through that pin, splay the end of it, and now you've got greater shear strength. So if that roll pin, tension pin happened to fail, which it most probably won't, then it would have to also shear the split pin. It's just extra assurance. Whenever I do a rear axle, I always put that extra pin in. It was a problem with the MGB GT V8s, but they have a lot more power. I don't know why that would make a difference, or whether it's just because 1973 and 74, they weren't being as careful putting those things together, or what. So anyway, if you want to contact me, I don't have a Moss catalog here, and I can't, but if you want to contact me, give me a call tomorrow. And I'm fixing cars tomorrow. I'm doing my rolling tech tomorrow, but the next day or something, call me and we can get the Moss catalog open, and I can at least point at the part that I'm talking about. But you got the age of your tires is of more concern to me than the condition of that tension pin. So.
All right, well, thank you very much. I do, by the way, have brand new tires on it.
Okay,
so,
good, good.
But no, I had the rear open, and when I first got it a couple of years ago, everything looked good and all that, but I did not take notice to that pin or anything. But
sure,
I have a Moss catalog here. I'll have to take a look at it.
It's a little tiny tension pin. You get a relative position of that pin. And then when you take the rear cover off, if you do, of course, you want to get a gasket to have it on there, and some ultra black or the right stuff to smear on the gasket. Then anyway, yes.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Okie doke. So we're down where we've already gone through an hour talking about MGA stuff, but if we're not done, we're not done with MGA stuff. So does anybody else have any comments about MGAs or questions? And then we'll get into the chat section.
John, it's John Stark here.
Yes, sir.
I spent a day with you mid-May at Quality Coaches in Minneapolis.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I was the first car up on the lift there. It was the white MGA 1600.
Yes.
And we looked at the gas sending unit, and I had a full tank of gas at that time. So you mentioned taking it off and rebuilding it. And I looked at your video you had, and I think it was an MGB sending unit, and the A's different. And I kind of chickened out, and I filled up the gas tank the other day instead of doing it. But exactly how do you do that, or what's the process I should be going through?
You've got the original sending unit still?
I believe it is. I'm not sure. I don't know how to tell that. I know we looked at it, and with the grounding was grounded.
Yes. Yes, because somebody else had done that. You
Yep.
had, yep, because you, all right. So with the original MGA, there's a cylinder about as big around as this pen, and it's wire wound with resistor wire. And there's 1,000, I don't know, there's 1,000 turns of wire on it. It's really, really, really wound tightly with that resistor wire. And the new ones that are made are not wound as tightly as that. What goes wrong with the original sending units on an MGA is either you get that resistor wire breaks somewhere along in there, and then the circuit opens up and you can't get any reading on your gauge. So it goes full, which is kind of weird. On an MGB, if you open the circuit, it goes empty. Anyway.
I'm reading empty right now.
Okay, all
And
right.
I put a endoscope in very carefully into the tank, and it looks like the float is floating from
Okay.
my iPhone.
Okay, well, wait until you've burned that gasoline out of there. I have no plans of being up to marks anytime soon, but I do have a series of pictures on how I'm just shot in my shop one day about how to pull that little cylinder out of there, and I can talk to you in detail about how to fix that. So,
Okay. Okay, I've seen Barney's picture of how to redo it, and videos are so much easier to follow.
yes, yep. Okay,
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks, John.
Hey, you're very welcome. Any more MGA questions from near or far, Minneapolis or Yorkshire? By the way, Howie, I'm in touch with Ray Cortland. But I haven't asked him about Mick. I don't know whatever happened to Mick. Anyway.
Can I ask you another MGA question from audio?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Go
Okay,
ahead.
great, thank you. So I just rebuilt my H4 SU carbs. Car's running great, but I have there's rubber grommets both sides on the, I think it's called the banjo bolt at the bottom.
Yes.
Now, I've always been told never over tighten those. But I've got slight leakage on both, but more the back one still. So I'm progressively tightening them and they seem to stop leaking and then they leak again.
Okay, so do you have a banjo bolt and a cupped washer that goes onto that bolt first, and then that whole thing threads up in there? Or is there a stud that sticks out the bottom and then there's a nut on the bottom?
There's a nut on the bottom.
A nut on the bottom. Okay, so tighten that up all the way.
All the way, so it's nice and tight?
Nice and tight.
No swivel?
No swivel.
Okay.
Well,
I'll
you
do
can
that.
always make it swivel, but those new seals are Viton, and they'll suffer getting pretty tight. So
Okay.
and
Thank you.
it's better to have them a little too tight than to have it dripping gasoline.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And my second question on the SUs, which would be anybody, I've been reading about different dash pot oils. I think the original is a 20 weight. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I've been reading that a 15W50 is sort of the best alternative to the 20 weight. I've also been told, transmission fluid's good, although I've read that could be a little light. So what's your feeling on the 15W50? It's Canada, so we have hot summers. I don't drive it past December, so it's cold when I shut it off, but it'll run right up till then.
So the reason that oil is in there is to prohibit the air piston from rising too quickly at acceleration. That's all. To slow, to dampen the movement of that air piston. It'll finally get to where it's going. But the question, does it get there in a quarter of a second or a second and a half?
Right.
So when those are filled with oil and you put your finger in there and try to lift that air piston with your finger, it's like impossible until you get your finger way underneath it. You can force it way up, and yet you take your finger off and it just falls instantly. I mean, it falls easily.
Yeah.
It's a one-way valve. It's a shock absorber.
Yeah.
And the goal is to dampen the movement, to restrict the upward movement of that air piston. By holding that air piston down longer than it naturally would be, the air going past the main jet is in a smaller area. The venturi, or if you want to call it a choke, the venturi is smaller. Therefore, the air is going faster. Therefore, the pressure there is less, and more gasoline gets sucked out of the jet than would be normally.
Okay.
You want a really rich mixture at acceleration, not too rich, which is what the downdraft Webers have is the Weber stall. When you go to accelerate, if you got a downdraft Weber on a later Model B or something or other, it stalls for just an instant. That's because it gets so rich that it can't fire. Not that rich, but that won't happen. That will not happen with an MG. You want the thickest oil you can get in there to restrict the upward movement. Now, when the carburetor was brand new, the workshop manual called for engine oil, 2050. But how many times is that air piston slid past the fixed brass valve since the car was new? Every time the car accelerates, 30, 300, 3,000, 30,000, 300,000, 3 million, I don't know, a lot, a lot. Every time that piston goes up, the dirt that's embedded in that brass valve abrades the inside of that dash pot. Therefore, the distance between the valve and the dash pot increases. Therefore, the original oil isn't thick enough to dampen the upward movement. Therefore, lots of therefores here. You want the thickest oil that you can get. I always use 90 weight gear oil. Now the guys in the trade will say, well, you know, the viscosity of 90 weight gear oil is the same as 2050 because they're measured on different scales. 90 weight gear oil is real thick.
Yeah,
real thick, and that's what I use that's what I brought with me to use tomorrow.
Good. But that would be okay driving in Canada in October, November?
Anytime. Yep.
Okay.
Gives you a nice rich acceleration. Now Volvos, Volvos use MGs.
And the SUs,
Their owner's handbooks tell you to put in transmission fluid.
Right.
Is that because the clearances were tighter on the ones they bought because they were brand new, because they're in Sweden and it's the temperatures are cold? I don't know. But I do know that the thicker the oil you can get in there, the better acceleration you'll have.
Okay. And if I have 20 weight in there, I think right now I'm using up the last of my original, dash pot oil. You can buy.
Oh, just take the rest of that dash pot oil and open up your engine and pour it in there and put some 90 weight in that cute little bottle,
Yeah, well, that's what I'll do. But my question is, can I blend the two, or do I have to
sure.
kind of, yeah.
Oh,
okay.
sure. You can, or you can simply take the suction chamber off and take the spring out of the way, pick the piston up, turn it upside down, drool that oil out on the linkage on the carburetors, so that especially the rotary linkage and so forth, so that it works better.
So you don't think this whole 15W50 would be better than the 90? You think 90 would? Okay.
I don't.
Okay. All right. I'll try that. Thank you.
Okie doke.
Hey, John, how much goes in the dash pot?
Fill it right up to the top. You cannot, well, you when you overfill it and then hit the throttle, the excess oil shoots out that little hole at the top and oils up the linkage or some stuff on the firewall or the underside of the bonnet if you've got the bonnet closed. The only problem I ever saw of putting too much fluid in there was a guy who used brake fluid. Why would you use brake fluid in your carburetor? And so when the oil came out, it took the paint off on the underside of his bonnet. Anyway, whatever is in there that's excessive just pisses out. So there's no problem.
Okay, once you have the cap screwed back on, it'll still piss out.
Oh yeah, yep. And as long, and actually on an SU, once you put oil in them, you never have to touch it again. As long as when you're pushing that damper down into the top And just before you hit the threads, just before the threads hit the top of the suction chamber, that's an 11/16/26 British Standard pipe thread. I know you wanted to know that.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, just before you get down there, you can feel the restriction of the oil. That's plenty right there. And the oil doesn't go anywhere. Stromberg carburetor, modern MGB, modern. The 40-year-old MGBs, if you still call them modern, the new MGBs, the Strombergs, those waste oil, those suck oil out the bottom of the air piston, but that does not happen in an MG. So once you got oil in there, it usually stays in there for a long, long, long time.
Okay, I had the new HS carburetors, so
Okay,
should be good,
Okay.
yeah. All right, thank you.
you're welcome. All right, well, we're gonna go over to the chat section now. So we've got
John,
yes.
quick question. Is that would the Zenith Strombergs need topping up regularly then because of
All
that?
the time, all
Yeah,
the
that's what
time.
I thought.
They go empty in an instant. So there's a number 10 O-ring that lies at the base of the dash pot. Because on an SU, you change the position of the jet in relation to the needle to adjust it. You move the jet up and down. But on a Stromberg carburetor, the jet is fixed and you move the needle up and down. So if for something to turn up inside there, you've got to have a seal around the outside so the oil can't leak out. That's a number 10 O-ring. If you buy some to replace the one that's in there, make sure it's Viton. That's the one that you're after. But yeah, you have to at least as often as you fill up the gasoline, you've got to put oil in those Strombergs.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Oh my gosh, here we got Mike Baldwin, who says, John, if you don't mind the suggestion, close the blinds to your right. It'll help excess backlighting. But of course, that was an hour and a half ago. and the sun apparently has gone down by now, even here in Memphis. So anyway, so I'm sorry that Mike, I'm sorry that I missed your comment.
No problem, John, but the first post on there was I put new MG siding. Would you like to hear about that?
Yes.
Well, obviously I'm wearing a shirt that says Reykjavik, Iceland on it, and my wife and I just got back from a two-week trip to Iceland and to Norway. What's that got to do with MGs? Well, I know they're not the MGs of old, but I stopped in my tracks and took a photo when I saw my first little MG crossover SUV looking thing coming at me with a big MG Octagon on the grill. And so I was mesmerized seeing those. Not that the styling's that great, it's kind of a me too, but one of them was a white one with a white grill, and it was an electric version. And, you know, I even got, my wife caught me looking, she says, what are you trying to do? I said, I want to see if those little hubs could come off of there and I could put them on my car. She says, you're going to get arrested. But anyway, to put the final thing with it, I saw about 8 or 10 of them between Norway and Iceland. And even one lady had one she was renting or bought. She was out videoing it with her phone, showing it to all her friends, her new MG. And the last thing that got me is we were heading out of Reykjavik back up to the airport to head out. And there was a dealership sign there with, I think, Skoda or Koda, whatever how they pronounce it, Suzuki, Toyota, a few other brands. And at the very top across it said MG with the Octagon, MG Electric. So I thought I have to tell you that it did my heart good to see the MG logo out there riding around again, even if it wasn't what we think of old.
Thanks. We often we have I'm blank. Rodolfo from Monterrey, Mexico, who's on here, and you can buy brand new MGs in Mexico, and the local dealership in Monterrey has taken his MG in at least once, if not twice, to put in their showroom to get people to come in and look at it. It's all restored, and while it's in there, they've given him a modern MG to drive. So
that is a great story. Unfortunately, my wife wouldn't let me put mine in my suitcase. It wouldn't fit in the aircraft. But it was It's one hell of a trip. What a place to see. But anyway, she caught me looking at cars here and here and here. And honest to God, I'll tell you this, and I will relinquish my time here. We were staying in staying in Bergen, Norway, and right across the street was a Polestar dealership. I like Volvos too. It was the electric Polestar. And as my witness, we go take the train across Norway, which is a beautiful train trip. If you ever want to do it, 7 hours from one side to the other, beautiful train trip. We got to Oslo, checked in our hotel, come out, went around the corner. There's a couple of flags out, and we're getting ready for some car show. It was a NIO dealership, which, is a low-cost Chinese electric car, for being just a statement of fact, not opinion. And but in front they had I didn't even know what it was until I looked 3 times. They've got their NIO supercar as their halo car, and it looks like a McLaren to me sitting in a showroom. So my wife said, how is it everywhere we go to a hotel on this trip, every time we book a hotel, there's a dealership around the corner?
Well, they're hot. They're hot across the world. The only place you can't buy them, as far as I know, the only place you cannot buy a new MG is the United States and Canada.
Well, they look nice. I give them credit. It looked nice to see that octagon on the steering wheel and the grill.
They use the same wind tunnel, for all those cars. So all of them end up looking kind of like my Chevy Equinox. I mean, they're not the sporty cars, but all the rest of them, So anyway, yeah, thanks very much. My dad was stationed in Iceland for 1.5 years, right at the very, very, very beginning of World War II. They were the first unit deployed to the European theater.
That was at base, the northern end of the country, correct?
My daughter just asked me, it was Camp Tiensen. I have no idea. They were around. They were around Reykjavik, because I've got pictures.
Okay.
He wasn't a general. He was on the general staff. He was a captain. He was on the general staff, and there's a picture of all these guys standing out on the tarmac when they opened the airport at Keflavik, so they could get the American airplanes.
Beautiful country, very friendly. I recommend people try it, and not an expensive country to be in. I didn't find.
They have once the Bank of Iceland collapsed and the whole country went into bankruptcy, I think they all came up with a common idea: we're going to sell ourselves as a tourist location, and it's been wildly successful. It's a real pretty country.
You haven't seen anything till you walk through a lava tunnel and then end up in an ice cave and hike a glacier. I'm guilty of all 3 on this trip.
Testimony to Iceland. Okay, thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. Wayne in SLO, will you be attending the GOF Central in South Bend next week? I'd like to meet you in person. We've learned a lot from you over the past few months. I don't have any plans to attend. I've got some cars I've got to get done in my shop, and I haven't got that on my dance card for this summer. My next event is Calgary, and that's later in July. But who knows? Not planning to go yet. So anyway, Mark B to everybody. Is there a way to make the heater in my 74.5 MGB a 2-speed fan? I bought a new switch with 2 positions, but have only connection on the fan motor for a single speed. So I don't know why it's a 2-speed. I don't know why it's a 2-speed switch. Doesn't make any sense to me, but
I think it's Chinese. It's
well, yeah, it's a light switch, which has got a fan on the front instead of a light. Because
I never thought of that. Yeah,
light's a 2-way switch. So the 77 through 80 had a 2-speed motor. They have a great big, massive wire wound resistor on the inside of the heater box. So it's full speed and half speed. So you can do that. Ken Costello came up with a better, he claimed it was a better squirrel cage fan for MGBs. I haven't seen one advertised for 40 years to fit in there. But there's, well, first of all, there's no reason to have it on a lower speed, probably, because when you want heat, you usually have not enough of it anyway. But you'd have to run a separate wire down to the heater box, put it through a pretty good size resistor, and then hook it into the power feed to the motor. And then you get a half speed.
I think I'll leave it alone. I'm in San Jose, California. And we don't get that cold here.
Oh,
So,
you don't, yeah.
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 Okay.
So you mentioned it was a light switch. I never thought about it as boom. Hey, oh, no wonder. So, hey, thank you for your help. I got a hot date. I got to go. So,
Okay. All right. Good luck.
all right. All right. Thanks, John.
Hey, you're very welcome. Paul M. to everybody. I'm rebuilding an XPAG engine from a 53 TD. Is the bypass valve under the large brass plug on the oil pump? So, Paul, are you still on, Paul M?
I am.
Okay,
And
so,
there's the big brass plug.
okay, that's, show me the other end there. That's the oil pressure relief valve there.
Okay. I
That's
was
got,
confused looking at some things. Apparently there's a couple options and I thought maybe there were two things in there.
you have got a horizontal oil filter, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so to prevent the engine from running dry, there's an oil, there's a bypass valve, so that if the filter were to plug up because there's so much crap in the oil, then, and if there's about a 15-pound difference between the pressure of the oil coming into the filter and the oil leaving the filter, this valve will open up and let the dirty oil come into the engine, better than no oil at all. At least that was the thought. That was continued on the Sprites. They even had a warning light on the dash, a yellow warning light that came on if that valve should open. Or the electrical switch to close, but the valve to open because you're running dirty oil. So in the beginning, there was a little brass plug that went into the block with an X to hold the ball in the right place, and then a spring in the ball. That was the oil pressure relief bypass valve. Later, when you go to the horizontal one, it's located inside that horizontal housing underneath the disc against which the oil filter abuts. If you take that great big fitting out, unscrew it, you can see the oil pressure bypass valve underneath there. So it's in the filter head, not in the one, not what you got in your hand. And the one that you've got in your hand is the oil pressure relief valve that allows the oil pressure not to get too high. And with the original spring that you have in there, probably a Moss 329080 spring, another one of the very few numbers I happen to have memorized, that should blow off at around 75 pounds if you're reading your oil pressure from the block, which I expect you will be, rather than from the head. So anyway,
Okay. One other quick question. I
Yeah.
twisted off the bolt or one of the bolts on the connecting rod. Is there a place I can buy one instead of a whole set?
Only from an engine builder who has one. Although if you twisted one off, did you maybe get another one or two too tight? It's the same as a Chevy, it's a Chevrolet bolt. It's the same size, 5/16, 8 millimeter. If you'll contact me in the next couple of days, I can give you the American complement, but you don't want to mix it. You don't want to change all 8, but it's just a direct replacement if you're going to go to the American one. Or you could call somebody who does engine work, Tom Longa in Maine. I'll give you his phone number. Let me just get out my iPhone here. Apparently the, using my iPhone to answer a question about an XPAG engine. It seems like a conflict in technologies. Just a minute here. I'll give you Tom's phone number. He might know somebody. He might have a single one. There's two types of Conrod bolts. The earlier style are drilled, and you're supposed to put a split pin through with a big tall castle nut. You got to make sure those split pins are tight, because if they're wobbling, they're going to work hard and then just break off. And the later ones use an Aero, A-E-R-O lock nut on them. Tom Lange, L-A-N-G-E, in Maine. His telephone number is 207-288-0978. He sells T-type parts.
Okay, thank you very much.
Might check with Ed Cook at Abingdon Spares.
Yes, I deal with them.
Okay, all right. And someplace out in the Moss warehouse is a broken set, but trying to find somebody who will go out there and find it for you and send it to you. It's a big operation. They haven't got time to make individual small sales like that. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Now we got Doug Miller. Doug, let's see here. Just let me get this. Got a bunch of silly little icons in the way here. Just a minute. I can't read your message. I don't know why. Here we go. You're looking well. That's very kind. When can we see the most recent Zooms you have done? Thanks. Marty, my administrative assistant, bugged me about that a couple of days ago, and she said the last time you updated those seems to have been February. So I'm embarrassed, and I will try to get those done soon. I make no promises, but anyway, I'll try to get those done soon. So, Robert Davidson. Yeah, you're still on. Doug Miller. Okay. Robert Davidson, I found a receipt under my seats back in 1989 when I bought the car, and it was from a department store in Memphis. I wondered if my car was sold there in 1977. Last week, I ordered a heritage certificate, and I'm excited to find out some history. So I refer to that exercise as M-genealogy. The factory can only tell you that it was dispatched, D-E-S-P-E, not dispatched, but dispatched to the United States. That's all it says there. It's why would you haven't cleaned your car since 1989, Robert?
No, John, I cleaned it like right when
that's interesting. I'm here with a lot of people from Memphis, but I just, I don't know who the dealer was here or anything at the time. I don't know. That's fun.
It might be, it's possible there was somebody there, but yeah, I remember pulling that thing out, and I pulled all the carpets out because they were mildewed because the car had sat out for a couple of years.
Yep.
But I can't remember the name of the department store, but I just remember it was Memphis.
Okay, all right. Back when I bought my MGA, I took my title and I wrote to the state of Michigan, and I said, who owned my car before me? And for $1 a name or $1 a copy, they sent me all the former owners of my car. I mean, they never, that was 1976. They never ever do that today. All that information's gone. It's not gone in Mexico. They've got that centralized bureaucracy there where they have records on every vehicle in Mexico. Every time an engine's changed, you have to record that and report it to the state. So anyway, but in Memphis, Tennessee, or Michigan, yeah, I probably can't find anything out, but hey, so. Okay. Mark, original 4-row competition. Yeah, we answered the oil cooler question. and Gary to everybody. There's a lot of GTs and looks like something was lined on your keyboard. Darren to everybody. Hi, John. Replacing the windscreen on my 73 BGT. Oh, boy. Does the gasket to body and or gasket to glass get sealant of some sort? I can't seem to get a definitive answer. So I think the answer is no. It's all put on with a really, really, really slippery liquid. My suggestion is to hire that job done and get somebody that knows just how to do it. It just doesn't even make much difference what they charge you as long as it's less than a new windscreen. Because new windscreens don't quite fit and the rubber doesn't quite fit. And they've got the goo, the slippery stuff, and they've got the glass. I think I'd put it all together and then before you, if you haven't got too much more of the interior installed, just to hit it with a garden hose sprayer and just look. And if there's some place that seems to be leaking, then attempt to find the leak and push some we had the name of that. We had some 3M stuff, a couple of seminars ago, a couple of tech sessions ago. Somebody had black mastic, some 3M product that was used for windshields. But I think the answer for sealant is no. Okay, so Alton, MGA. Where can I get MGA dampers that don't leak? So Alton, are you still on? Should have asked during the MGA section that we had there. But I assume that Alton's talking about the front shocks or the rear shocks. And my go-to place always is Worldwide Imports in Madison, Wisconsin. They do a really, really nice job on the MGA shocks. You can buy new ones, which don't look like MGA shocks. They look like MGB shocks, but the levers or the arms are put on. The correct arms for an MGA are installed, but when you look at the body, instantly, if you know what you're looking at, you know you're looking at modern shocks, dampers. So,
hey, John.
Yes.
To go back to the question about the windshield, I was the guy that got this stupid question started because I ended up having to pull my windshield out of the frame on a Roadster. And I'm still looking at the frame, scared to touch putting a new glass in it because I ended up busting my glass that I pulled out, which was my own fault. But it's called 3M 08509.
08509, 3M.
Yeah, it's a 3M black. It's a black sealant of some sort. It never dries. It's just a gooey, mess. And I've had a hard time finding it. 3M had this thing on back order for months. And there's a few places, I think Napa had it, some of their stores, and they could get it to me in a week. And I not to do it, and that was my mistake. So I'm still looking for it, but that's the product.
You've been on Amazon and eBay. Those are the two. Okay, all right, okay. Thank you very, very much, that 3M product. So George curled everybody. John mentioned in specific glue to use on an MGB top. One of my top bows was not glued to the fabric. I think I remember John mentioning that needed to be glued for the ease of folding. Does anyone remember? I do. And that's the rear bow. And the glue that you want to use back there, again, here we go with a 3M 5-digit number, 08090. 3M 08090. And of course, the can is like $40 or something. It's really expensive. You can get brush on. You can get smaller brush on, and you can almost make a case that in that application, brush on might be more easily applied. George, you're there. It
No,
might be that brush on is more easily applied because when you're going to glue it into place, you got to have the top up and those two flaps hanging around the bar. And then you get the glue on the inside of the bottom flap and on the bar. Wait 2, 3, 5 minutes, whatever they tell you to do, and bring that flap up underneath to the bar, seal it against the bar. Then you put glue on the inside of the top flap and on the outside of the bottom flap. And after waiting the correct amount of time, bring that piece down and put it on and wait for it all to dry. And then, yes, putting the top down, that bar doesn't fall out of place. That bar was held in place on an MGA and T-types with screws externally. So it's not unusual, or I mean, there's a flap there that's designed just for it, but that's 3M 090 glue, yellow glue. It's really good glue. You just follow the instructions and it'll do the job for you.
Hey, John,
Is that,
I always use Weldwood contact cement for that. Just brush it on.
Okay, all right. So Fred's suggesting Weldwood
right,
contact, and again, it's yellow. That's Fred, that stuff's yellow again, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, and it's cheap.
okay, all right,
Is that-
good.
is that the same as Gorilla Snot?
Yeah,
Maybe.
it could be.
I'll
but,
second the Weldwood.
yeah.
I don't know.
Thank you very,
All right.
thank you.
Hey, yep. Good luck, because then you can fold the top correctly. So. Okay, so Tom Bean over in the chat section has a site from Yukon Gear, YUKON, Yukon Gear. And that tells the difference between all those different types of half and floating and 3/4 rear axles. So Tom Bean, thank you very much. I get some background noise. I'm gonna hit mute all here, not because I don't like you, but because there it goes. All right, so now we got Mark and we got the leaking SUs. We've taken care of that. Clay Collins. So, hi, John. Who do you recommend for an MGB speedometer calibration? Neisinger is no longer repairing instruments. I added an early overdrive and need to update my speedometer. So I suggest that you send it to Morris at West Valley Instruments. Help me out. Is he in Los Angeles or San Francisco? I can't remember which, but
He's
they
in
got a
San
website.
Fernando Valley, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Okay, so that's West Valley Instruments in California. He won't be flooded. That's what happened to Neisinger. They had a great business going. Peter was doing just a wonderful job for so many British car owners on the East Coast, east of the Mississippi. And they had that last big flood that came through there about 2 years ago. Just they had water 4 feet deep in his shop, and it ruined so much of their stock and equipment that they just stopped doing it. So, oh, and here
If I can weigh in on this, John.
Yeah.
Man, John Wolf Incorporated, Willoughby, Ohio. He does instruments, airplanes from Alaska. A lot of his customers. He did some antique guys. He did my MG speedometer, and he's kind of an older guy. And I asked him if he's going to retire soon. He says, "Yeah, when I fall off the bench." So,
and that's a double F, right? WOLFF.
I think so. Yes.
Yep. Willoughby, Ohio.
He's a very pleasant man. Seems to know what he's doing.
Yep. I remember him from 40 years ago. So. All right, here we got Severio Pota MGB with with a Weber carburetor and headers. When going downhill and using my Jake brake, I get some backfiring in the exhaust and some rumble. Anything to be concerned about? No, not really. The reason that the exhaust is backfiring is because it's got a leak. in the header. Remember, headers, all headers are hot, all headers are noisy, all headers leak. So when you're decelerating and you're running down a hill, the engine, you got your throttle backed off, and now there's not enough exhaust to pressurize the system, and the air going through there draws fresh air through the leaks. That fresh air combines with gasoline, which has not been combusted because you're backed off on it and there's not enough air fuel in the engine to combust. So you got raw air fuel running down the exhaust coupled with fresh air, and the combustion occurs in the tailpipe. Pa 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 when you're going down. It usually doesn't cause any problem. If you get a tremendous backfire, I mean, kabam, like a rifle shot, there are people who have had their exhaust systems literally blow apart, but that's very rare, and I don't think that's going to happen with your car. So.
Okay, thanks. Any concerns about using a Jake brake? Well, I mean, it's just using the engine to slow you down.
No, no, that's fine. I thought you were in Honduras or something for a while.
No, not me. No,
Oh,
Toronto
right.
born.
Okay, all right, okay, all right. So yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So Gil Dupre, responding to the complaint about the gearbox, which is in 2 gears at one time, simply says, put in a 5-speed. So it's just downstairs here at the hotel, the Hilton Hotel in Memphis at this NAMGAR meet. And I was sitting at a table with Forrest Johnson, who took over my shop, and Glenn Lenhart from Glenn's MG service in St. Petersburg. And they're all about putting the modern 5-speeds in the car because the gearboxes are so much better. But I cannot any longer call myself Mr. Original. I had to retire my membership card from the Positive Earth Society because I switched my MGA over to a single 12, and as long as I was breaking the ice, I went to negative ground. But there are a lot of people who have a lot of really, really nice things to say about that 5-speed because it's the 5th speed is overdrive. So. Simon Boothroyd, open to John's perspective, pros and cons, regarding the Moss Supercharger kit for my 72 midget that I'm ready to commit, but seeking smarter folks' input first. So if there is such a thing as a silver bullet, it certainly comes with a silver price tag, it's a supercharger.
Oh, good.
There is just no question. And I can't speak to numbers on a midget because I don't know them, but I do know numbers on an MGB. So if I spend all day and tune up an MGB and make it run as well as I possibly can, say a 67 MGB, I might be able on a good day to get 70 to 74 horsepower from the rear wheels. You can argue all day what the engine puts out and everything, but those are real, honest to goodness, tested numbers. You put on a supercharger, you get 95, just like that. So it's now you can take your engine, your A-series engine, get Vizard's book, and do all the stuff in there that he talks about.
Yeah.
The funny valves and the compression and yada, yada, yada. And by the time you're done, you will have spent almost as much money as you will on that blower. That blower is a silver bullet. It comes sometimes with some trouble. They had trouble with them in the beginning. I wanted to say they just switched to an HS carburetor from an HIF because they had so much trouble with the HIF carburetors. But geez, I mean, it really, there's enough room in there and it works. And I got a supercharger one time. Guy came and sold me a Judson supercharger for a Bug-Eye Sprite. And I took a picture of it and sent it to Joe Curto, and he snatched it right up from me, probably for the bragging rights of having an original Judson. Those things are real thrashy. But those new Eaton blowers, those things are the nuts. And it just transforms. And you don't have to do anything with the engine. You don't have to do anything to it.
What are
don't
your
have to
limits to compression?
What's that?
If you've already raised your compression, can you run them? or
Well,
do you
if
have to
you're
run
up
half
to,
fuel?
if you're up to 10-1 or something like that, no, you'd want to keep the boost way down. Yeah, absolutely. That is correct. But if it's,
What if you're a 9.5-1?
oh boy, I don't know.
Close?
If you talk to the salesman, they'll tell you that it'll work just fine. But who else knows about blowers on midgets? I don't know. Keep asking. I mean, it's a rational question because what's the price tag on that thing? $5,200 or something?
Yeah, you're close. Less than a year ago, it was about 42, I think, and now it's 49 plus tax. Shipping's free.
You got that going for you.
Yeah. So I think I'm sold. And the engine's decent. I bought it in San Jose. Somebody here is from San Jose. I bought it 30 years ago odd, and changed the head, no lead head, and it's got a nice manifold and things. And it's running well. I just wanted to run faster. It's an 8.0 compression ratio, and all the cylinders are decent. I will say, somebody was talking about 5-speed. I found this the other day, which you can't read, but it's my 1997 invoice from Mini Mania when they were in Milpitas for the 5-speed kit from Rivergate. And the only reason I got it out was I was talking to the Will Perry, the Rivergate guy, about whether or not you can change the adapter plate and have the no sort of oil leaking feature. But I love my 5-speed. I have to say I love it. Now it's been in there 25 years or more.
What's your diff ratio? It's a 72 midget. That's a 3.9 then.
3.9. Yes.
Yeah.
The original. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got all the frontline stuff like the brakes and all the rest of it. It's really not that original, even though it looks.
No, I can tell already. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, hey, good luck. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So let's see, from David's iPad, I replaced the fuel tank a number of years ago, put on a new fuel gauge sending unit, but when filling the tank full, the gas gauge reads 3/4 full. How can I get a more accurate fuel volume reading? David, are you still on?
I am.
And what year and model is this?
It's a 1980, and I've lived with this 3/4 full tank for a number of years, and I'm thinking, gee, isn't there a way to get this to be more accurate and indicate a full tank? It just won't go above like 3/4 full.
Okay, so it could be that the arm inside needs to be bent. It could be as simple as that. How much? Oh, I don't know. You got to take the fuel sending unit out, bend it, put it back in and see. Or you could run the thing down to where you think it's about at the end, you've never been that low, you don't want to go any lower, and then stand at the gas pump sometime when the gas station isn't busy, put in a gallon, read your gauge, put in a gallon of gas, turn on the ignition, read the gauge, turn it off, put in a gallon of gas, turn the ignition on, read the gauge, turn it off, and just incrementalize it up so you can see if where quarter tank is, because maybe quarter tank is accurate, and it isn't necessary to read 3/4, but it is accurate. It is necessary to read 1/4, which is about as low as you'd want to do. So there's two possibilities. One is that the arm isn't bent correctly. Another possibility is that the float is not a float, but at least a partial sink, and it's got gasoline in it because it's perforated. But by this time, it probably would have filled up more. Depends where the hole is in the float. You can buy just a new float. It was probably just the arm. The new sending units aren't wound, the wire wound resistor on the inside of them is not wound with the same fineness that the original ones were. The original ones had a little plastic phenolic strip inside them with hundreds of windings, it would seem, hundreds of windings around it. And then there's a little finger that runs on that, and it's just a rheostat. And now those windings, instead of being hundreds, there's only 50. And sometimes it drags one of those wires or something. So anyway, you got to take the sending unit out in any case. So you can jack up the car on the right-hand side, you just start with a new ring and seal, ARA 1501 and ARA 1502. Those aren't Moss numbers, obviously. And jack the car up on the right-hand side, so whatever gasoline is in there all rushes to the left. Take the sending unit out, bend it, think about it the way you're supposed to bend it, so it's going to bend correctly, and read differently. And then put a lot of grease on the rubber seal and on the sending unit and on the back side of the ring, and put it all back together and use a blunt chisel and get that ring in real tight. Let's try it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Judd, I haven't seen you on tonight. Are you still
I
on?
had to go rescue a friend of mine who locked his damn keys in his damn truck about 96 miles from here, and called me at 7 o'clock and said, "Help, can you pick up the other set of keys?" So I am not a happy camper. So go back over everything that I missed, would you please?
Yeah.
But
okay.
seriously.
So anyway, you on your TD, have you got those washers on those orange washers on the bottom side of the dampers where they screw into the suction chambers?
I believe I do.
Take them off. Just take your penknife and slice them, because you can't unscrew them. Slice them, just take them off, and now those capsules screw in more deeply. It's not the threads on the dampers, it's the threads on the suction chambers. Now those suction chambers are the same through 1974 MG Midget. TD, not TF, TD, and then we pick them up again in a Bug-Eye Sprite. So they are the same. The suction chambers are the same all the way through. So you can change the suction chambers so that you get better threads at the top.
Okay.
But you should match, you should, like they tell you in the workshop manual, you should match the drop, so that you get a good drop.
Right. Got that part. But what happened, and this is only anecdotal, I can't prove it, but it seems that it used to happen when the car overheated a lot. Then I got the overheating resolved. Then I went on a trip just recently, got behind some Florida motorhome going up a long, slow grade at 25 miles an hour. And I probably should have been in second gear, but I was in third gear and let it overheat. When I got to the top of the hill and pulled over, I noticed both of the dampers had unscrewed and come out of the top of the carburetors.
I don't think they unscrewed. I think they pushed past their threads.
Okay,
Now,
so by removing that washer, I get more thread to hold them in place.
Right.
Okay, that's what I'll do.
And maybe because the whole engine bay got so hot, the aluminum expanded just that little tiny bit.
Aha, it did. Well, I don't know. I was up to about 100 PSI on the temperature gauge.
Okay, that's pretty hot. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Right. All right, thanks. Good to see you.
Hey, pleasure. Pleasure indeed. Simon Boothroyd, made in China MGs. Yep, we got that. But we got David Basili replaced the fuel tank a number of years ago and included a new fuel sending unit. And when? So we're waiting for the rest of the mystery. David, are you still on?
Yeah, you already answered that.
Oh, all right, okay.
It was another chat. I don't know what happened. It was
Oh,
got fragmented, a fragmented chat.
a fragmented chat. Well, better than a hanging Chad, and far better than a pregnant Chad. You know, so, okay, all right, all right. John Pandisia, do you have any advice on removing the rear wheel hub nuts on an 80 MGB? They look very rusty. It does not have wire wheels. Are you in luck or what? So, John, are you still on?
Yeah, John.
Okay, so those hub nuts, I'm just sure they're 1 5/16. They're real big, and take that. You don't have to take the split pins out, but it's better. It just theoretically it's better. So draw the cotter pins, the split pins out. Do you have a air gun available to you?
I have an electric impact wrench.
Well, you know, it might do it. Just put it 1 5/16 on there. I think that's the size, and rattle it, and it'll come loose.
Well, what scares me is there's so much rust, I can't even see the pin in there.
Oh my gosh, this is an LE?
Yes.
How did I guess? How did I know that?
I don't know.
The rest of the cars, when you get water inside there, the water can fling out. I mean, the thing's spinning real fast, but LE wheels, for whatever reason, traps the water inside there, so you get all that corrosion. So you know, clean it off as best you can with a wire wheel, or I mean a wire brush or something or other, and put a lot of oil on it, and find the pin, pull the pin out, and run it off. If you needed more nuts, if you wanted to change the nut, for instance, you could get those from Ian at Sports Car Craftsman in Arvada, Colorado. You can probably buy new ones from Moss. Get them from Matthews Foreign Car Service, or you could get them from, just a minute, Triumph Rescue in, not Willoughby, oh, come on, Triumph Rescue in Ohio. So that everybody's got boxes of those things because nobody ever needs them.
Triumph in Ohio.
Team Triumph, yep. In, not Willoughby.
Warren.
Warren. I got the W right.
Yeah, close enough.
Help me out, yeah, okay, all right.
You know, if I can add something too, we've been using something called Deep Creep. It's made by Seafoam. We worked on a 52 TD Mark II, sat outside for 30 years under a cover. We had to take everything apart and we sprayed it for days with Deep Creep, hit it, sprayed it, not one bolt or nut broke. They all came loose.
Testimony.
Yeah, that's some pretty good stuff.
Yep, if you got time to wait, you can use Deep Creep, Royal. Well, there's a whole lot of penetrants. Or if you want to do it in a hurry and you got access to an oxyacetylene torch, you heat it up, getting close to red hot, and it'll come off in a jiff. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okie doke.
Just make sure he uses a 6-point socket so he doesn't strip that bolt.
Yes. Good point. All right. So I think, no. Just about now. We got Bradley Schwartz here. What is the effect of having weak springs on the SU carburetor pistons? For example, compression to 2.3 inches instead of the specified 2.6 at 4.5 ounces. I don't think that will make any difference. 0.3 of an inch isn't going to make a difference. But the effect of having weak springs in the carburetors means it's going to run too lean. That's the effect.
Piston rises too high.
Yes. And therefore the Venturi is too large, and the air passing over the jet is going too slowly to create the vacuum that it's designed to create. So, but that's just a tiny little difference. So.
Thank you.
Yep. And my last one tonight from Doug, he's got a count of people who were on tonight. There was 149. So we usually have a few more, but hey, I'm in Memphis tonight and it started later than usual. So anyway, that's the end of our chat section. Again, it's 9:10, so we didn't run too far over tonight. Let me make a pitch again to go to my website, universitymotorsltd.com or universitymotors.online, find the PayPal button and make a contribution. I would appreciate that. Be very kind. Also remember that there's our summer party. If you're from Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, you've been to a summer party before, you want to come back. So many people you haven't seen for so long. Come back to the Hilton, back to Douglas Walker Park. Registration fees, $45, dinner's more. But it's we've got the park, I've reserved the park, and we're gonna have just a real nice low-key event. I'm here at the NAMGAR event, and they've got silent auctions, and they've got voting, and we got name tags going around our neck. We'll probably have name tags so you can recognize the people since you haven't seen them for the last 6 or 7 years. But it's going to be a low-key event. No voting, no stress, and anyway, look forward to seeing as many people who might want to come to the University Motors summer party reunion as possible. So our next meeting is 2 weeks from tonight, which 14, that must make it the 26th. I could do the math in my head. So anyway, our next meeting is the 26th. I will be sending out a constant contact to remind you of that. And in the meantime, as always, if you have a question about your car, you can't get it sorted out, especially gearbox questions, that's a pretty good one. I'm stumped on that right now. But if you got a question, you can call me. It's better to call me between 1 and 2 in the afternoon. I will be busy tomorrow. I'm going to be out on the field all day tomorrow from about 8:30 and probably till about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, working on MGs in the hot sun, and I'm not going to be ready to take a phone call, but anytime after that, better between 1 and 2 Eastern in the afternoon. That's the time that I have set aside to take your calls, although I do take them at different times too. So to those who I have not yet thanked personally on email for your contributions, let me publicly apologize for not sending you out a note, but I will. Thank you note, and thanks for everybody. And I want to say that that's about it for tonight. So if you want to hear something that you haven't heard before, want me to talk about some things I can't talk about, like how to reupholster your front seat, I don't know, I'll send it to the upholsterer. But if you want to talk about differentials or brakes or gearboxes or engines or ignition or whatever you might want to talk about inside the car, the history of the gallon. How about the history of the US gallon? There were 2 gallons in use in Maine up until about 1910. So there's lots of interesting stuff about the gallon. Anyway, that's sort of a joke. I mean, who really wants to know about it? If you want to learn about it, you can go on to Wikipedia and you don't have to hear me talk about it. Anyway, until then, thank you all very much for being here. And I'm switching over to my gallery view so I can say goodbye to the people. You can unmute yourself if you'd like and say goodbye. Oh, Jim Pastor, I see Jim's on tonight. I'm going to be in Altoona, Pennsylvania, the weekend before Labor Day, the weekend after my summer party. We've got a technical seminar. We're building a Midget 1500 engine in Jim's garage in front of a group of people. We'll get it assembled and started up, Deus Volente, if the creek don't rise. And then there's a nice low-key party that they have, British Car Show, that's often attended by a few more Triumphs than MGs. So we need some more MGs to show up at the Central Pennsylvania British Car Festival in Altoona. Must be about the 19th, that'd be the
26, 27.
26 to
And
27.
this year, Alpine East and Tiger East are coming here for their big bash. So we should have some tigers.
Like Sunbeams. Oh my gosh. So that's the Roots. Sunbeam is part of the Roots group, just as BMC was MG and Morris and Wolseley and Riley and then BMC included Austin. The Roots group was Hillman, Humber, and Sunbeam. It was purchased by Chrysler Corporation really early on, probably around 1960. So
Yeah, Alpine East and it's called Tiger East. They do a bash every year. So they're coming to ours for the bash.
very cool. Very, very cool. And I see Barney's on tonight. Barney gave a talk after mine today at the NAMGAR meet in Memphis. So
Hey, you want to ask me where I am tonight?
where are you tonight, Barney?
Well, if you look straight up at the ceiling and turn on X-ray, see my
Okay, all right.
right over here sitting on your head.
All right, okay. All right, I'll thump on the ceiling later. So, okay.
Thanks,
Right.
John. Maybe next time you can explain bachelor's lean.
I'll have to read up on it.
No, I'm serious. I read something about my MG leans to the left side a lot. and they-
I'm sorry. I thought, you know, with your heavy accent, I heard Bachelor's Lane, L-A-N-E.
No, lean.
I'm thinking
as-
like Lover's Lane, you know?
No, I
Oh,
don't think so.
Bachelor Lean, yes, yes. And I expect in England, the car leans to the right on a Bachelor Lean. Sure, I'll be happy to talk
I
about
would figure it would, yeah, seeing how, yeah.
springs and suspension. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, mine is definitely leaning and I'm looking at leaf spring, I guess replacing leaf springs. from what I read.
Absolutely, yep. Unless you're cheap and just switch them side to side.
No, I'm not. If I'm gonna pull them apart, I'm gonna put new ones on. I mean,
Okay, well, caution about the new ones. So yes, we'll talk, how
Well,
about that? We'll talk about
You can
springs.
talk to me all, yeah, that's great. That's what I want to hear.
All right, and George, you're out of the hospital. I see a line there with the headphones on.
Yes, I am, John.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I'm recovering very slowly. But
Hey.
I probably won't be driving my MGB until next year,
Okay,
unfortunately.
well, hey,
But better to be above the ground than be below the ground.
okay, all right, well, hey, yep, hey. Good, good,
Thanks for asking, John.
good thing we got your steering wheel changed in time, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I can look at it. It's nice and straight.
all right, okay.
Thank you again.
You're welcome. Okay, well, everybody, thank you very kindly, and I'll look forward to seeing some of you next time. Oh, Doug Clark, we can't have our hat contest tonight because what kind of hat are you wearing tonight, Doug?
I'm just wearing a US Open golf hat. I
Oh,
got
yeah.
New Jersey back in 1993. I did have an alternative hat at the ready, but I didn't want to shame you by putting it on if you were not equipped. So
I'm not equipped. We'll have our hat contest in 2 weeks. See who can come up with the best hat. Okay, all right. Okay,
all right,
well, anyway.
good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night.
everyone. Thank you very much. So.
Thanks,
Thank you,
John.
Good night.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Night all.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, John.
John.
Good night.
Good night, Crystal. Heard your voice. See ya.